Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's On the Fly. Tonight, we're with the Central Oregon Fly Tying Guild, and it's a fly tying clinic on the 16th of January. And I'm going to be talking about my signature fly, the Muddle May, with one exception. Let's go back to something here. Did you notice at the very bottom it said Muddle May, and I kind of went over that? Then it says special. I wonder what special could be. We're going to go to the recipe and you're going to find out because it's kind of to honor one of our favorite people. The Muddle May Darling Starling version will be tied tonight. It has never been tied before. I, I usually tie at least one fly as a roadmap fly. So this will be a total brand new one for me. The first one out of the vise tonight will be the one you see. And we're going to be tying a dry fly. I'm going to be doing a 12 tonight, but you can see it's done in a range of sizes. The thread will be gray or whatever you want it to be, moose tail. And it usually says Wonder Wings here for the wings on this fly. In fact, the example I'm going to show you has Wonder Wings, but we're going to be using starling body feathers today. And the body will be dubbing gray. Hackle is deer body hair, and the head is spun and trimmed deer hair. Now, before I get into the materials and that type of stuff, questions before we get started. Okay, well, I developed this fly in 1985. It came about by the situation in the commercial tying world of getting materials. At that time, in the mid 80s, there was almost zero genetic hackle. Everything came from India, and there wasn't one single grizzly cape that I could ever find coming out of India. There was a whole lot of other stuff, but not grizzly. We were talking about not being able to get hackle, and when you could get genetic hackle, it was from a small grower, and you had to wait until they harvested their birds to get the feathers. Consequently, I would spend almost all of my winter tying flies. And as an example, the day my friend was visiting and this fly was developed, I was tying on an order of a bunch of Adams with a hackle point wings, but no hackle because I didn't have the hackle at the time. I was hoping that my order would come through early in the spring. And anyway, so I was tying away, and my friend said, it's kind of frustrating not being able to put the hackle on. I says, yeah, you're right. He says, well, why don't you pull, you're awful good at spinning here. Why don't you put a muddler head on it? So I did. And that started it. And it eventually became this fly right here, the Muddle May with the Wonder Wing. But it had its start in life, if you'll notice. Here's one that's got hackle point wings on it. And that's what I started out using, and it's gone through a whole lot of different iterations to get to where we are tonight. But to tie this pattern, I've got some materials over here, and the first of which is a starling skin. And I'll tell you what I think about the starling after I go to tie it. But it's a real pain getting these little feathers out and getting them paired up to tie on a hook. That's all I'll say at this time, and we'll go from there. I want to set those aside for a minute because what I did is I fiddled and fumbled around with those darn things, and I put them in a clamp so that I've got several set aside in a clamp so that I'll be able to pick them up when I need to pick them up. Okay, we're going to be using dubbing for the body. I've got gray thread, and I'll set that right over at the vise right now. Moose for the tail, and deer for the hackle and for the head. So let's get back to the vise. And I will start by pulling the thread out from under the O-ring so I can, there we go, we're all set for that. And we'll get rid of the roadmap fly. You know what it looks like, except you don't know what this one tonight's going to look like because it's never ever been tied before. But I do have some feathers in a clip waiting for me to go on, so we'll hope that they go on okay. Anyhow, getting a hook, to place in the vise. All right, good. And I'll grab my close-up glasses now so I can get some thread on the hook. And I'm going to start my thread base back about at the 1/3 position on the hook eye, or on the hook shank, excuse me, back from the eye. And I'm just going to wrap to the end of the shank. And I get right there to the end, and I'm going to come back halfway and stop. That's because I want to get a bundle of moose hair over here at the materials area. And one of the things about the hair on a hair wing fly, the amount of hair in the wings and the tail and all that stuff has got to be balanced, or the fly will fall on its nose or its tail all the time. Not such a big deal if it falls on its tail, because it usually will tip over and right itself. But when they fall on their nose, they don't. And the balance of this fly is one of the things that I really struggled with for a while, because I tied materials where I thought they should be. But anyway, the first thing I did is that I took the traditional tail, which is much more robust than the one I'm going to use tonight. But it's only shank length long, which, well, what I really needed on this fly, because it was landing on its nose, is I needed more weight sticking out the back. So I went to a sparser tail, but a longer tail. So it's about, shall we say, a hook and a half, give or take. What that does is it just balances that out fairly well, and still keeps a nice slender profile that we're looking for to imitate the mayfly. Messed up the tail a little bit there, but I'll take those out. That looks like that's coming together pretty good. Now the next thing I'm going to add will be the hackle, and I'll go back over here to the materials area here, and I want a reasonably robust bundle of deer body hair. And one of the things that I need to do is I got a whole lot of waste and trash here in this end, and I'm going to stop at the waste bin on the way back to the vise to clean most of that out. It's better that I get that into the waste bin rather than all over my camera. And I also don't need it all over the tying area. Okay, well, you notice that looks pretty clean. All that fuzz that I had in there has been eliminated. I'll slip it into the hair stacker, and I'm going to want these to go on the hook with the tips pointing forward. And I want these to be just slightly longer than the hook shank. And I want them kind of fanned over the top of the hook shank. Well, one of the problems is this hair will migrate down on the sides one way or the other, unless I do one thing, and that's to take a loop around the bundle of hair and then anchor it in place, ensuring that will remain on top of the hook rather than sneaking down underneath. All right, now I'm going to trim off the waist, pulling the waist at about a 45-degree angle towards the back of the hook, and laying my scissors in flat along the shank so that I get a nice severe taper, blending the waist from the tail and the waist from the hackle together. You see how that's all kind of blending together, and the taper that I cut into the waist of the hackle just makes a nice taper to the body of the fly. All right. Now here's one of the things that it took me 2 years, because it was what I ended up finding out was the fly was falling on his nose. So what do I do? Well, maybe I could move the materials back. Maybe I needed to put more materials in the back. I just couldn't quite figure it out. But anyway, in time, I found what I'm going to share with you right now, which I had to separate the positioning of the wings away from the hackle. A lot more than what you would think. So back to the vise, if you would, sweetheart. Now I'm getting ready to install a wing behind the hackle, and the hackle is still pointed forward. And in fact, you notice my thread is hanging right about there. And for years, I would tie my wings on right up next to that hackle because it just looked like that's where they needed to be. Well, that didn't work out. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab two of these starling feathers and try to tie them on right where I need them, which is right here. And I trimmed that off at a pretty good angle so I can still blend the waste from the wings into the tapered body. Now, what I've managed to do is one of the things that I don't have to deal with on the regular Wonder Wing is I've got a bunch of extra long barbs here on this feather that are tangling in my hackle, and I hadn't taken that into account. So I'm going to have to work my way out of that mess by working my thread back through that, separating the two. And let me get my tweezers out here because I've got a hair that's just going to be made up its mind to be in the way. And now I'm going to reach in here and get that wing and tease it around to where it needs to be. Oh boy. Okay, there we go. Got it finally. Now I want you to notice that I have a space between the base of the hackle and the base of the wings. That's really important. In fact, I could even have just a little bit more space. Let me back that up just a tiny bit. I want a little bit more space in there. In other words, I'm positioning those wings back on the shank, and I want those wings tilted back. Let's take a look here real quick at, okay, there's the regular Muddle May. Notice how those wings are not straight up and down, but tilted back? That's part of the repositioning of materials that I had to do to get this thing to land right on the water. But anyway, and you can see that that's what I've done here too, is those wings are tilted back. Now the extra fiber in this darling starling is, well, it's a challenge. But that's all right. Now I'll go ahead and put some dubbing. Let me get over here and grab a bit of this gray dubbing. I'll just take that bundle over at the vise and reach over here on the bench behind me and get some dubbing wax. I'll get some wax on my thread. And what I'm going to do is show you, besides putting dubbing on this fly, is I'm going to show you just a commercial tires trick that can really speed things up if you want to, if that's in fact what you want to do. And I'm just going to start by putting my dubbing on the thread. But I want you to notice that I have a fairly pretty robust application right here. And as I work closer to my bobbin, I am going to make that a little bit sparser. And the reason for that is you'll see here in just a moment. All right, now I'll just start wrapping and I'll start applying my body here at the front. Dubbing my way towards the back. And when I reach the back, I've run out of dubbing magically. So then I just come right back forward, putting in a rib. Now I could have tied this with black, but I didn't. But when that gets wet, it'll be a segmented, a nicely segmented body. And if you need a rib, you can adjust the color of your thread and all the stuff that you do. And that's just another way of putting on a really fast body and putting on the rib and not having to do a bunch of extra counter wrapping and everything, because you're actually counter wrapping given the fact that the thread is it reverses itself when it goes from one direction on the hook to the other. Now I want you to notice that I'm standing my hackle up and I'm pushing it back because I'm going to build a thread dam tied up against that hackle here in front. Now I'm really cranking back against that. See the size of that thread dam there? Got that in there pretty tight, and it's a pretty severe thread dam. Okay, so, and I also want to verify that my hackle remained on top of the hook. It did, except for one. There's a barb here from a feather, and here's a hair fiber right here. I'll get rid of that, pull that up there. All right, and now I'm going to spin my first application of hair right here at the front or the lower end or the pointed end of that thread dam. And that thread dam is important. We're going to come back to that here in just a minute. Let me slip over here to the materials. And I'll just cut a bunch of this off. I'm going to stop at the waste bin to get rid of the trash. Although I don't need to worry so much about getting rid of the real short fibers, because this is going to be a bundle of hair that gets spun on the hook. All right. Now I will even this up. I just went off camera and did that over the waste bin right here. And I'm going to take a couple of three, and it's got to be at least 3 turns around this bundle of hair with about half pressure on it. And I want you to notice that I'm pulling this down on the side, and I cut my thread. Now that wasn't a very smart thing to do, but now I get to start over. But this is a good place to start over at. Now what could I possibly have done wrong? Oh dear, I'll bet you it's been a long time since I tied one of these. I'll bet I pulled that hair when I cut it off in the wrong direction. I bet I did that. We'll find out. Let's go back over here to the materials, and I'll cut another bundle of this hair, and go back to the waste bin and get rid of the trash. Okay, great. Okay, and just need to I got a little bit too much here. Now, as I recall, I got into trouble when I tied the hair on with several snug, 3 of them, and I pulled the hair this way when I should have went this way with it. Oh, that would have had it going in the opposite direction of where the thread was hanging. That's better. Okay, now let's go ahead and spin this in place then. And I'll pull my thread forward, and I can tell you right now that I need to spin another bundle of hair. Probably kind of hard to see that, but you can see I got a little bit of space there. I'm going to go ahead and spin another bundle of hair in there. And let's see. Now that looks pretty good. Oh, thanks for restringing that for me, Gretch. I'll probably cut it again too. Let's see what we can do here about spinning another bundle of hair in front of the one that we already have. And I'll pull that off away from me this time to cut off the waste. And we'll just spin this in place, getting that last bit in there. I want you to notice that I left some longer hair fibers in the front. That's because it's a lot easier to pull back to do the last of what I need to do, which is going to be put in some half hitches before I go to trimming the hair. Let's just put in a half hitch there. And another. And you can do a whip finish with the same tool depending on how you pull it off the tool by putting two turns on there. and allowing it to collapse over the original strand so that you end up with a whip finish. But you have to let it come off of the tool just right, or it becomes a two-turn jam knot, not a whip finish. All right. Now we're at a point where we're going to trim hair. Let's see here. I going to kind of fluff this up just a little bit on the bottom because my first trim is going to be along the bottom of the hook shank and just flat because I want this bottom of the head to be right flat even with the body. And I'll just trim that flat there. Get any... Okay, good, good. Okay, that looks good. Now, I'm going to give you a tip about trimming hair. It's so easy to get a head that's lopsided on the hook. It looks great when you look at it from the side, and when you look at it from the front, you'll find one side or the other has, well, you didn't do a good job of trimming it.
It's got longer fibers on one side.
Longer fiber on one side than the other. Well, there's a way to fix that so it never happens, and I'll show you how I'm going to do it. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'll turn this towards you, and I'm going to cut one bundle right here straight, another one right here straight, and then another one straight across the top. In other words, I'm going to cut a square. What that does is forces me to do my shaping within the box because that's all that's left to trim. But to do that, I'm going to have to do it so I can see what's going on. And unfortunately, you're going to be able to about halfway see what's going on because I'm looking up from above the camera and the camera's looking straight at the vise. So you may or may not be able to see really what's going on too well. But I want you to see that right there, I cut a flat on one side. Now I'll go to the top here, and I'll cut the top of the box. Okay, well you can see that one's flat, and now I've got one more to cut flat. Now, if you look at the front, you can see it's pretty well. It's hard to tell from this angle, but it's right on even as far as the box is concerned. Now all we have to do is knock off the edges and round it up the way we want it to look. And then we have to get this hair back against the hackle fixed. Well, I'll show you how we do that here in a minute. But let's first start by just trimming around the front end here. See, all I'm doing is knocking off those square edges and rounding the front. That makes the rest of it look like it's rounded, but it's also not all lopsided. And anybody can do it. Don't have to be a small fly like I'm working on here. You can do that on your regular bundler. Square them up and then shape them. That way you will have a symmetrical head rather than a lopsided head. Now here we've got hair fibers sticking back in the hackle. Do you remember that thread dam from way back when? Well, I'll tell you one of the things that I made a point of spinning the first bundle of hair at the front of that thread dam, which is right about there, in front of the hackle. There is a bare space down in there that's covered up right now with the hair fibers that are laying up against it. But if I take my scissors and tilt the points down, I'm going to exaggerate like this. The scissor points won't cut the hackle, but will be crossing over that thread void, if you will, which is what I'm going to do right here. I saved these right here just special for you. See how that gets that right up next to that hackle? You want to take a tight shot on that, Gretch? Right up tight to that hackle and didn't cut the hackle. And that's because I angled the points of my scissors down rather than straight back at the hackle, and those scissor points are crossing together over the void from the thread dam. See how hard of a time I have when I try to just lay it in there straight? But when I come, see, I don't know. Am I blocking this, Gretchen?
No.
Okay, good. I'm trying to get the points in there, and so they cross.
Shows good.
Does it? Okay, good.
Makes me nervous. Just,
You think you're nervous? You ought to be in the driver's seat. It's scary, let me tell you what. Now, here's a couple where I'm going to have to do another trick that works really well, and that is to take your scissors and push the hackle back until you can get those hair fibers right in front, but not snagging any of the hackle, and you can get the last of them that way. Just another way of getting those. And you could trim all of them that way by pushing back. There's a couple of hairs that need to be taken care of. And there's a couple that need to be taken care of. But anyway, there it is.
yeah, you got to quite stick it straight up there a little bit.
Where I've got what, sweetheart?
No, this guy right there. Make him go back. There. Whoops. There you go.
Okay. And so there we have a darling starling Muddle May. I'm thinking I'm liking those starling wings a lot.
Well,
Yep.
now I've got a use for it. Yeah, it's really good. I didn't know what else to do with it.
Well, you could be tying your atoms and stuff like that out of them, Sherry.
Okay.
I mean, that's just a thought, or whatever other fly that you wanted to do. It's a really cute wing. I mean, with them, I don't know if you can see it on this. Yeah, you can see the little brown tip out there. I think that's just as cute as can be.
Yeah, and the fish won't see it, but they'll eat it.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure.
Looks
And
like
maybe
there's
it'd be easier to see, huh? When you fish it.
Yes, very easy to see, and it's a high floating son of a gun. Very high floating. But a lot of people have trouble tying the spun head and all of that. So I have a simple version for you.
What's the size?
First, I want to answer quick. I'm sorry, Sherry, what?
What size the hook is that? This is Steve.
well,
That's a size 12 hook, if that was the question. I didn't.
but I've seen him do it on an 18 and a 20.
I do it
too.
on 18s and 20s all the time. The only thing on a 20, you don't spin the hair, you have to flare it in place.
I never could figure out how you do it on a 20, but you do.
No, I only flare it in place. I don't try to spin.
Yeah.
So what scissors do you use? Do you change scissors when you tie
Nope.
tie that small?
No,
Nope.
no, I don't change thread. I don't change scissors. I
Thing with those whisk clips, both of us. It's
almost
just-
almost everything. Once in a while, there's a small thing here or there that we do, but
I even use whisk clips in my sewing now, just because I'm so used to them.
yeah, I can't tell you. I mean, how many times we'd spend all day at the Vice and one of us would say, "Okay, well, I'm ahead on the order. I'll go get dinner started," and you'll be halfway through starting dinner and realize you go to peel the potatoes and you still got these in your hand. Now, you think that's joking? That would happen more often than not. You just got so used to your scissors always being in your hand that it just.
And I also, and I don't think Al does this so much, but I also lots of times when I cut my thread off, I put my thread there so that it's right there when I start the next fly. But
Are you
I just-
skating that fly at all when you fish it?
What do they say?
No, are you skating it when you fish it? I can tell you is when I fished it one time on what is it goes through Missoula
It was a Clark Fork.
Clark Fork, and it was a really tough riffle, and there were fish in there, and so I put on a Muddle May because it really floats good through riffles, and I just floated it through the riffle and had a really good time.
But to answer your question, any place that you would use a standard dry fly, a parachute, if you skate a parachute, well, then you can skate this. And if you don't, you don't. It's basically an upstream dead drift kind of a presentation,
Good
or
floater, good
a good floater is this main claim to flame. If if I want something to skate, I've got better flies for it.
What do you skate?
Oh, probably the hair bear in a larger size would be one that I did last week. No other questions, right? Okay, we're going to do an easy version of this. We're gonna provide with you. In fact, let's go to the device. I want you to see the profile that we're looking at there. You're looking at a head, a body, a little bit of wing and hackle. And of course you couldn't see the tail there, but there's a tail. So we're going to go ahead and do an easy version that probably just about any of you can do. And I'll start by getting this out of the vise. Get a hook in there. And I'm going to start by just placing my thread turns right there behind the head, or excuse me, behind the eye. I was lost for a minute. I laid my scissors down and I was totally lost. I didn't even know how to function. That's how married to your scissors you can get. Okay, I just threw a half hitch in there. Now I'm going to go over here to the materials area, and just so you know, I have a little bit of CDC.
Oh my gosh, look at
So you know, so it isn't like I'm trying to save anything or don't want to spill it out of a little bitty bag. I've got lots. I've already got several selected and put in a clamp, so I don't have to go through a bunch of them looking for them and hold you guys all up tonight. So I'll hang that back up.
Start a fly shop when he's not watching.
Yeah. Let me get back over here to the materials area.
Oh, materials, okay.
Yeah, okay. And I've got several of those CDC feathers that I placed in a clamp. No, we'll just get over here to the vise. And I want to just make sure that the tips are pretty much lined up. That's not working out so good. There we go. There, that's better. That's what I wanted to do. Now what I want to do is I want a bundle of this tied right on the front of the hook that's just slightly longer than the hook shank. And I'll just bind that in place really, really tight. Cut this off. I don't care about tapering it. I just want to cut it off. Just like that. In fact, that's very important that we have a little drop off like that. Now I'm going to go just a little bit further down the hook shank. And I want you to notice that I've left a gap here. The back of the head and a gap to where the tail is going to be applied. Let me get over and get some mousse.
How many feathers did you use?
This is the larger fly. I used 4, but you'll adjust the number of feathers based on how fluffy they are and the size of the hook. Okay, now I'm going to get some of this mousse for the tail. Now the tail, it's going to be mousse because I got it laying here in front of me. However, I have tied this fly with several others. A hackle barb tail is quite good, if you, especially in the smaller sizes. Now I'll just slip this up into the hair stacker.
Infamous hair stacker.
Yes, one of them. Oh, and if Jay Lee from Europe is watching in, the hair stacker is not, I say again, not for sale. Okay, I got a couple of wild longer ones there. I'll get rid of that. I want it to be fairly long just for the same reasons that I did before. Tie that in right there. Wrap towards the bend. Okay. Now I'm going to pull the butt ends of that tail over just like that. And then I'm going to cut a very severe angle on that waist so that I get a nice taper to the body. I just wanted to build up a little bit of a thorax there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is put on a little bit of dubbing. Let me just get the dubbing over here. Get out a little bit out of the bag. And get my wax. Wax the thread. Now I want to keep this fairly sparse because most mayflies are fairly sparse when you get right down to it.
Is that super fine dubbing?
This is soft touch that the Gretchen manufactures.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to start dubbing here at the front, working my way towards the back until I run out of dubbing right at the very back of the hook.
Sherry, that's a fiber we get from Australia that I make that with.
Oh, okay.
And now I'll rib forward with the thread, just like I did before, leaving it set right here in the middle. Now, the reason for that space between the head and the body is what's going to make our wings stand up. Now you'll just kind of fan that out. And what you've got now is a couple of turns in behind that. Do a whip finish. And if truth be known, folks, I probably have fished this version more than I have the other.
Now, you don't have any hackle on that, just a wing, huh?
The only thing I have on it is CDC. You call it whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
It's fluff.
That was easier to do.
It's quite easy to do.
Less steps.
But take a look at your profile.
Well, Terry Martin said he's amazed that you got the second set of hair on the other fly.
Oh,
Nice.
okay. Well, that's
And he said, I like that.
oh, good. I'm glad you like it. I breathed a sigh of relief because I'm gonna have to tell you the truth. I haven't tied a Muddle May. I did a magazine article for Jack Gillis. I don't know, the last couple of months, and that's the only one that I've tied in a long time. I just it's an incredibly good fly, but Gretchen and I don't fish too much anymore. And the devotees that were part of the regular group of people that bought them from us all the time, well, they're not around anymore.
So
By
that's
the way, if you don't have the CDC, poly yarn is a good substitute.
oh.
Just be careful not to overdress. Thank you so much for joining us. For now, though, it's a wrap until next time.